Hello and welcome. We are live specially to discuss something very important today. Very important because these are times tough for business, but when the times are tough, the opportunities are also bigger. We're going to be talking about the face of manufacturing that is changing. It's changing very fast in India and particularly noticeable in the last 18 months or so. The pandemic has made the workforce more mobile than ever before. The way the workforce is engaged in the manufacturing operations, that has changed as well. That means companies, they face a challenge even as they continue to go about their business as usual. So that is just one part of the new normal. It's important to understand this context because of the kind of challenges that manufacturing companies face today. To talk about the how to manage the manufacturing workforce during these times of uncertainty, I have some very eminent people joining me today. Mr. Rajneesh Kapoor from JK Cement, Mr. Ajay Lal from Tata Motors, Mr. Aris Sachdeva from Aisha Trucks, and Mr. Sumit Doshi from UKG join me. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. It's a pleasure that you could take out time, and we'll be discussing this important topic and something that we'd love to hear from you on some of the challenges and some of the solutions that you found to those challenges at your manufacturing operations. But it's very important to understand the context for which we're going to be talking over the next little while. The workforce of today cannot be like the days they were yesterday, because not every person can come to work as they would probably 18 months ago. We all want those times back, but till those times return to normal, we'll have to live with this. What are some of those challenges? How can companies and how can industries, how can manufacturing operations make sure some of them can be managed in these uncertain times? So let me first ask Sumit Doshi to give you a context of what it could mean, what are some of those challenges, and how, maybe if he could even suggest how are some companies addressing those challenges. Mr. Doshi, it's over to you. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Ashutosh. It's my pleasure to be here amongst the August panelists. Thank you, Mr. Kapoor, Mr. Lal, Mr. Sachdeva as well. I look forward to a great conversation as we go along. But I think, as Ashutosh mentioned, the upheaval that we've had in the last 18 months has been like no other since maybe we've had industry over the course of last century or so, right? Especially the impact on its people. And with UKG, we've been specifically focused on managing the workforce in manufacturing environments efficiently over the last 40 years. In fact, what we've done with some of the largest manufacturing organizations in the world has been about how those organizations can effectively manage their workforce on the shop floor, get the better operational visibility, how the variability around workforce can be managed better so that your operational efficiencies and productivities are better. So we've spent our 40 years doing this, but in the last 18 months, a lot has changed. And the way organizations manage people, the way you can get the best out of your people, a lot of things have changed around it. And we wanted to hear from leaders of the industry, like all of you on this panel, hear from you in terms of how you've spent how you've spent your time and energy in terms of managing your people better. I would love to add some of my thoughts as we go along with a lot of customers that we have been working with. But what we've noticed over the course of last 18 months is a huge change in the way organizations manage their employees. And in manufacturing, unfortunately, we do not have the luxury of working from home. As I, from a software company, as you can see, I'm working from home. But we work with a lot of manufacturers, and there is absolutely no luxury around it. And hence it becomes critical to manage the entire life cycle of an employee home to home. from the time an employee leaves the home till he comes to the plant, how you manage his safety, effectiveness, his production, everything, and then you safely get him back home. That entire journey became so much more prevalent. While safety was always of paramount importance in any manufacturing organization, it took a completely different dimension also in the last 18 months when it had to come to managing your employees. So it is some of these contexts that if you see, all of these contexts are directly related to how your workforce is being managed, what are the challenges you have around managing your workforce, and whether those workforce is your full-time workforce, or most of manufacturing organizations also have what you might call as the contract workforce, and they are also people, right? For example, one of the largest conglomerates in India, who's a customer of ours, has about 60-70,000 contract employees. And when the vaccination timeframe came, they were actually able to use the data from our solutions to be able to get exact visibility on where their 60,000 contract employees were across the country, so that they could go and do vaccination. So whether it is full-time employees or contract employees, it has become critical for organizations like you to be able to get better visibility, manage them better. And of course, you have to get your manufacturing indices in place as well. So it is some of these areas that I'd love to hear from you, your views on this, and love to share some of my thoughts as well. Ashutosh?
Okay. Thanks so much, Sumit, for setting a little bit of the context. Now, let me get some input also from the very eminent business leaders on the platform today, and who will be giving you a sense. Mr. Lal, first, let me suggest, or let me ask you to tell one of the largest passenger vehicle companies and commercial vehicle companies in the country, and how has life changed in these 18 months, and how have you tried to address it? Because the manufacturing operations also across cities and across entire supply chain, if you will look at, that has multiple cities in it.
That's quite right. Thank you, Ashu, first of all, for having me on the panel. And you are absolutely right. I think the COVID pandemic changed things to the degree never seen before. So I think when it started in India, we had actually started, as all of us know, in China, and we had some experience of how it got handled in China. We have our subsidiary JLR working in China, so we had some inputs on how they managed. So when it started, we had standard operating procedures coming from Ministry of Home Affairs. We also benchmarked some of the companies, like I said, who have already faced it. And we created our own SOPs, very robust SOPs, and, made sure that we adhere to that. So let me start from, Sumit mentioned about home to home. So actually the challenge was first, starting at home. So how do you convince, people at home to let their, dear ones come to the plant in such a pandemic, right? And so that was a difficult task, first of all, because everybody is actually quite scared of the situation. Nobody knows what's going on. The vaccination were far away. So what we did was, some of our senior plant managers, they started talking to the families on social media, Facebook, and things like that. And they started telling them on what kind of precautions are being taken, what kind of SOPs are being created, how will they be fetched from, their home to buses, what kind of, precautions will be taken in the bus, what will happen on the gate, how some of these health checks will be done, how the whole work will be arranged in a manner that there is social distancing, nobody comes close, and how so Asu, we have something called self-directed teams on the shop floor. So also, and then this was a very interesting piece. So we made one of the members of, so self-directed team is all about, 12, 15 people working at the same place, working as a team. They're kind of self-managed teams. So we designated one of them as health, let's say health steward. So he will also be a conscious keeper that all the SOPs are being adhered to or not, whether the masks are being, put on all the time, double mask, sanitization at a certain frequency, the line balancing in a manner that nobody comes closer than 2 meters, and and all such things. While you go to, then also, there were cameras put, and there were alarms if we saw people coming closer. And if there was any incident, then you have to trace back possible exposures to the people. Those people have to go through the test, and when they're okay, they're allowed to come in. Also, we had compulsory RT-PCR and those rapid antigen tests for the people who were coming in. The canteen were organized in a different way. So a whole lot of these things were done to give confidence to people. And so much so, Ashu, that people later realized that they are safer inside our plants than in the city, where there was really not so much control. So that's how we manage the people. So the whole idea was to have an end-to-end safety for all our people. And that's the way it got managed. I'm very happy to say that it was quite well controlled in almost all our plants.
Okay, I'll come back about some of those details in a while, Mr. Lal. Let me request Mr. Kapoor, because there the operations are slightly different, because there will be a mine angle to it, Mr. Kapoor, and also there will be the plant element to that, and which is what makes the operation slightly, geographically at least, slightly more wider spread. What were some of the challenges that you faced?
I think a lot of points which Mr. Ajay Lal has covered are applicable to all the production outfits. The first point that was very important for us, because we are a process industry, and my kiln is supposed to run 365 days a year. Only when I have a major shutdown, it's supposed to be stopped. And in a plant, some of my plants, I have multiple kilns. So to understand that things could come at a grinding halt, that was the biggest shock, I think. So everything can stop, and stopping an equipment and a machinery which is supposed to be running 365 days a year to 24 hours, and then making sure that you are able to maintain them and start it back again. So the starting was all right from there. Our challenges became more because, like as you said, that there are contract workers, and so we have within our plant. So in terms of workforce, we had workforce which was captive within our colonies of the plants, and there was workforce which was coming from the villages around us.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty early on, I'm not talking of the initial period of last year when the lockdown meant that all production facilities got shut down. But as we started opening up, very soon we realized that it is not just important to manage our plant, it is equally important to manage the ecosystem from where workers are coming. Because if in their villages and I think the experience that all of us had in the first COVID wave was that in the villages people didn't bother. They said this does not come to our villages, and it was a big challenge for us to go to the villages, distribute the sanitization equipment, masks and things like that, because they were stepping into my plant. So some of the things we did immediately was to be able to identify what is the minimum number that is required to run the plant. What are the minimum number of equipment that we can run, so that we continue the operations and maintain, and how we can house people. So while occupational health and safety, the workers' safety, their safe places were always important, but this was never a question that two people could not sleep in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
And so our labor colonies, and I had a problem that we were having construction going on at site, and there were migrant laborers who were worried. And initially our response was that don't let them go. But then when we placed ourselves in their shoes with empathy, that imagine that he is worried what is happening in his family's side, we arranged buses for them with food for 48 hours. And the good part was, moment they felt confident, they came back, because they felt here is an organization which cares for us. So all these multiple challenges, and I think the most important thing in this period was how do you communicate and you show genuine actions that you are taking. It's not just on, because this is where life and death is coming. And just drawing back from one more point from my experience in the armed forces, where we expect our soldiers to go into a mission knowing fully well that the chances of getting out alive are not that bright. Now, I think production is not armed forces, and we are not talking of life and death. But if we can give the confidence to the people coming into our plants that they're going to be safe, like Ajay said, that people felt safer inside their plant premises than when they go out. And I think it was a fact that all large corporate houses, responsible corporate houses, their plants were islands of excellence in terms of COVID management as compared to you step out of the plant and go to the closest market. So it was quite I think it's quite a learning experience for all of us.
Got it. Okay, Mr. Sachdeva, what has pretty much a similar industry as Mr. Lal, except that the size of the vehicles would be, I would imagine, bigger in your case. But what were some of those very specific challenges that you faced in terms of getting the right people inside the plants and making sure the operations could run smoothly once things started opening up?
Thank you, Ashutosh. I think most of things have been covered by Rajneesh and Joy, and most of the countermeasure and processes followed were almost same. But still, I feel that one point very, very clearly come that when there was an enormous amount of fear and a less amount of casualties in the wave one, at that time, giving the confidence to the team, that was number one priority. That how do we lead from the front, ensure that you yourself are present in the plant, and to give the confidence to the team and their families, yes, you are there to take care of them. That was the very, very big enabler what I saw that which we could implement, that which could help us to get the people inside the plant. So that was number one. And second was how do we engage with the stakeholders? Because a lot of curfew related problems, lockdown related problem, where the administration around you want to support you, but because of multiple communication, there's a lot of confusion around is there. They're engaging with all the stakeholders from the administration, arranging the curfew policies and making sure they also needed help. They needed help in terms of ambulances. They needed help in terms of medicine. And they needed help in terms of the food for the people who are stranded on the roads. They're ensuring that so that they are on your side. And also you are able to do something for the society. There also, we found that if we have to really want to perform that, we have to take care of society as well and ensure that the temporary workmen, drivers who are standing around the plants, they are taken care of very well with the help of the administration. That helped us a lot. And similarly for the hospitals, ambulances, and remdesivir and other medicine, those were provided to the administration around. And they're very good, I would say the connect was there with the administration that helped us to streamline the operations, both in wave one and wave two. And third thing was that another challenge which we are facing because complete ecosystem was closed and everybody was struggling. You have some of the quality issue. You have quality issues because of some issue on the supplier side or internal process side. Your supplier also has got the similar problems. One side, there's a customer waiting for the products, your product. Second side, you are facing either the supply chain issue or the quality issue. Managing that with that type of resource constraint. And that's where the organization culture, where I think all of us as an industry are able to do that thing, building that confidence and trust with our teams, making sure that they have confidence that if in case anything goes wrong, we are there to take care of them. That was a very big enabler, and that's where we could say, not even a single person I remember that who said that I can't come to plant. I don't remember that 6,000 people are working here, but not single person was reluctant. Whenever there's a need was there, that was people were there. And second thing, what we did was, because COVID was out of our control, as Rajneesh also said very well, and Joy also said, we were finding another problem that within the plant, we were not having any COVID cases. But whosoever was going outside Indore, MP, to his native place or some other place, when he come back, he will bring the COVID with him. First, he will infect his family, and then he will, if we come to plant, then you have a problem. So we made a rule that anybody going out of our home station, whenever he come back, he has to go to the COVID test. After the negative report only, he can enter the plant. So because there are a lot of festival was there, Diwali was there, some Holi was there, festival where people was traveling, ensuring that those people undergo the COVID test and then they come to the plant. And those type of things really helped us to control the things, and so much so that people were feeling that coming to plant is more safer than living in home and then working around the society or colony where the problem can be much, much higher. So that's how it helped us to control the situation. And that I feel really proud that not only us, but I see the whole Indian industry, auto industry specifically, because I come from that. I think Tata Motors, we, Leland, all those, I think we could able to manage the things. And as the production ramped up, 0 to 100 in 3 months, 0 to 100% capacity in 3 months, never seen, but we could do it. I think that was very, very challenging.
Awesome. So let's get to the specifics then. I'd like your input here, Mr. Doshi, a little bit. So what would be a right way to check people's entry into the plant so that, the people who are affected should not get to the production area in a situation like this? And, there is this lurking fear of the third wave. So in that context, what is a smart way? Because Mr. Sachdeva also referred to, how do you get your best people in and get them working?
Absolutely. So it's an interesting question, and I think is there an absolute answer to it? Not as easy as one would say that there is a foolproof answer to it. If there were, I think we would probably be solving it. But there are a variety of mechanisms organizations have deployed. We've helped many of our customers with some of those as well. Technology has been a very important player in that, though that's not the only option. For example, we all have seen that as a person enters, there is the temperature sensor, and all of those things are being done. So that's a reasonable deterrent. But if you look at asymptomatic cases, you can't eliminate those. So that's where at times you need to get into a bit of a process as well. For example, as Mr. Sachdeva mentioned, if there is a person who's traveling and who's traveled outside the home station, then you need to probably have some kind of a test available to see if that person is fine or not. So that's an example. As we are going through the vaccination program, and as we seem to be getting through vaccination, increasingly a lot of companies and countries across the world are beginning to get into a direction saying that if you're fully vaccinated, then we don't need to do any other test for you, right? In fact, my company, though we are a software company, my company globally is looking at opening up its offices in the US, Europe, and so on. And employees are welcome who are fully vaccinated, right? So that is another thought process which I believe will get adopted in India also. Government is already thinking of it. Even today, when you travel with flights, I was recently traveling from Delhi to Mumbai, and I had to show my RT-PCR because I'm not fully vaccinated. But they were open to not checking RT-PCR for people who were fully vaccinated. Right. So I think it's an ever evolving piece, not an easy answer, quite frankly, in my view. But process and technology come together to really help a lot. As a matter of fact, I would try to take that a step forward as well, Ashutosh. There is always the chance of a person slipping through who might be infected into the premises. There's always a chance. Companies have gone through it. And when that happens, you also need to have the framework or technological framework in place to do what you might call as contact tracing, right? So a person goes in and let's say in a factory environment, there is an attendance he marks, and then he walks into his work area, and then later on we come to know that he's affected. Can you trace his path back from the time he entered the office till he was on his shop floor and he felt sick and went home? Can you trace his path back to figure out who were the potential people he came in close contact with? And that can be done easily through technology. For example, we helped some of our customers with some such technologies in the early days of the kickoff, of the lockdown last year, right? So customers are continuing to use that. Contact tracing internally, I think, is an important area that comes into play. There are also the other area that we saw that we were able to help. It doesn't work for maybe every company, but there are a lot of mechanisms to do it. For example, the planning window for your people has shortened a little bit. Earlier, you could have planned for a month, for 6 months, for 1 year. I know of companies who even have shift rosters available for 1 year. That's no longer possible, right? Your planning window has come down dramatically because you don't know what's going to happen 1 week down the line, and so on. So how can you use technology to get your planning done much faster, much more effectively in a smaller window? Things like staggered shifts. when people are entering into a place where it affords you, in a car environment, car manufacturing environment, for example, if people have to get into a line, you cannot have a 15-minute delay of people coming into a line. But there are places in every organization where you can afford to create some kind of a delayed entry. So instead of 500 people walking in at the same time, can you delay that over the course of, say, 15 minutes to 30 minutes? So as you can see, it's a mix of process and technology that comes into play to try and drive, try and stop infected people from coming in. But also, it's not because it's not foolproof. You will also let people in, and how do you adapt and manage after that as well? It's really where technology comes into
play. Very interesting point, Mr. Kapoor. If you'd like to get in and also talk a little bit about how has it changed. How had this 18-month window or period changed the way you plan? And do you think it can still be improved? Is there an opportunity there as well?
So I think I liked what Mr. Sachdeva said, that, in the initial period, we had a lot of fear. The risk was less. And a time came as the wave 1 started, coming down, that the risk started increasing when the wave 2 came. But the fear factor was not there. And only when people saw people dying around them, and I think it was really bad, the 2 months of April and May. But what I would say is that, coming from an industry where we have different kinds of people coming in. So one of my plants is located in a city, now a city, 40 years back, it was a village, and where now the city and my plant have got integrated among each other. Because Nimbahera, where my original mother plant is now, my people are integrated, and, a chap is there whose father is, working in a bank, or they have a halwai dukan or whatever, and they are coming and they're mixing in. So one thing we realized, come what may, whatever you do, you cannot prevent the entry of a person who could be COVID positive. So what do? We realized that the first thing we need to do is we should avoid mass, that the virus going into multiple, so many number of people. So what are the areas where it could spread to more number of people? We first control that. Let's say canteen is a place where they come for eating food. And I think Ajay had mentioned that. How do you, manage your canteens? People are working, in areas where they're working close to each other. Let's say my packing plant, where there are 4 or 5 people working together. I told them, okay, output is not material at this point of time. You just make sure that you stay at distance. What do you do when they come in? Do they wash their hands? Then, and if you are washing hands, and if you put one wash basin there to wash with sanitizer or soap, and you have thousands of people coming, like staggered timing, do you have multiple entry points for people to come in? And more importantly, we said, okay, we have a 3-point mission. We can control COVID. I can prevent myself from catching COVID. If I wear a mask, if I sanitize, if I make sure that after I touch any foreign object, I am going to sanitize myself. Number 2, I am going to make sure that anybody who I see is not following, I'll report. Because he can spread to me, to my family, and I can go back and spread it to my family. I am doing it for myself, for my family. And I'm stopping others from doing it because for my company. And third, I will exercise my right in the area of influence that I have. So when I go back to my village, I will talk to the people in my village because they can spread it to me. So I think it was a massive awareness campaign. Then we had a challenge that drivers, in a cement plant, drivers are coming. I have every day 400 trucks coming, and they are there to collect cement bags and then go back. And somebody's coming from MP, somebody's coming from Rajasthan, Gujarat, Haryana. Now, how do I, check them? So on where the parking yard was, digital intervention, AI, making regular announcements. So we started off right after 2nd or 3rd day, a regular announcement of COVID protocol. And I think now things have changed because people really know, if they know the gravity is there, they will understand and they will implement it. So there were measures like ensuring that anybody who's coming from outside. Then the problem was when we have a workforce where we were manufacturing, where we were under constructing a plant, and thousands of workers had to come from different places. How do I, make sure that they stay in isolation? So we had to create isolation wards for hundreds of workers coming into our plant and make them stay there for 7-8 days. So as rightly Sumit said, there is no single solution here, and you need to have
Mm.
a whole lot of things. You can only minimize your risk. So that is what I think we all aimed for.
Okay, Mr. Lal, your inputs on, given the reality, given the new reality that we are in, so how do you maximize the talent? I mean, there has to be a scientific process to it, or there has to be a method to make the best out of the new reality till we come back to probably what we always call the normal.
That's right. So just building on first on what Mr. Kapoor said, Ashu, this COVID also actually made us realize that none of us is safe until everybody is safe, isn't it? Because if I am not safe, I have a potential to infect others, and therefore, it will just spread. So I think that was the first message that we gave to the family and our employees. We talked to the family, as I was telling you, on social media, and we told them that if you have any symptom, please inform us. People will reach out, you'll get medical help, whatever support can go, you'll get medical advice from our company doctors. So all help will reach out to you. But if you have any symptom, please stay at home. Don't come.
Okay.
This point was also driven home to the families. So they also made sure. So either you or your family members, if they have a problem, inform us, stay home. You'll be taken care of. So that was one thing which I think Mr. Kapoor was also mentioning. That was one way of taking responsibility and making sure that people who have chances of infection, they do not come. Of course, the moment we come to know, we had a quite a quick response team, which we do for many other business stuff in the plants, who would go reach out to them, get their test done, and the test is unfortunately not right, then do all the next steps of seeking a doctor's appointment and taking all the medical advice and things like that, and keep them quarantined. Also, like Sumit said, we have mechanism of contact tracing. So if this person has kind of reported some infection today, so we check out on last 3 days, where all did he go. We also had kind of a defined corridor for teams of people. For example, assembly line person would not go loiter around anywhere and go to engine shop. So he had a defined corridor. So we'll see which station he was working on, who were the potential people who would have come in contact, and therefore they would also be asked to stay away, get the test done, and only when the test confirms they come back. So this is something that was done, and I'm sure it was done in every other manufacturer's location. Now coming back to the talent piece that you were just mentioning, so this is so in industry, Ashu, in my view, you need a certain number of people to run your lines, isn't it? So there has to be that kind of attendance in the plant to run, especially the lines. But there are many areas where people could actually operate from home, and a lot of innovations also took place this time. Our people were actually able to see, suppose, in paint shop, it's very important that, the chemicals, they get stirred, and therefore the motor in the paint, in that tank has to keep running. So do you need a person to go and keep watching it, or can you have it remote sensed and get the signal on your mobile, so that from remote, from your home, you are able to make out that all my systems are working fine. This is just a small example, but there are many such things which were done where you could actually look at the condition of the machines from a distance, and a lot of work went behind this. That's where people came together, and quickly lots of such things were done, and therefore these things also enable people to actually control the footfall, so that you don't get people who are not required to come and inside the plant, because lesser the number of people coming in, better the chances of controlling the infection. So all these things were kind of done. Ashu, does that answer your question?
Yes, but there's another element of that I'd like Mr. Sachdeva to come in. From just-in-time production that some of the Japanese companies so excelled at, Mr. Sachdeva, to just-in-time people management. How did that change your operations or impact your operations?
If you look at people management, I will say that since number of people were lesser to start with because of social distancing, And then accordingly, you have supervisors who are taking care of that. And then you have created the two teams, team A and team B. You are making sure that team B doesn't come to office at all, unless asked for that thing. Unless somebody fall ill out of team A, then only you have got the fallback team which will pitch into that thing. So making sure that at that time, probably at some time of bonhomie, we saw that within the plant also. Once you have got some crisis, sort of crisis which is lurking around, you see union is coming and asking us, we are with you. You tell us what to do that thing. So whole organization is working as a very, very one unit at that time. And probably I feel that the way we operate in we commercial vehicle, I think we don't need that type of monitoring. And we don't have any incentive scheme. We don't have any overtime scheme. And those type of things we don't believe because we come from the Mitsubishi culture. We had a earlier collaboration with Mitsubishi. Now we have collaboration with Volvo for last 12 years. It's a Volvo commercial vehicle limited. So there I find that the management aspect was quite, I would say, strong at that point of time, not from the monitoring perspective, but more from the teamwork perspective. I see that. When teams are working together, they knew that in this crisis situation, they have to make sure that business continuity is maintained and people are remaining safe. As one unit, when they were operating and wherever they go, like many other suggestions we have listened that you go in canteen also, there's also social distancing, transport you see there also. And also we went for the 12-hour shift also, instead of 8-hour shift, so that you can produce within 12-hour shift without actually bringing the new people in the plant.
Got it. Got it. Very interesting.
Government of Madhya Pradesh also supported and they extended that 8-hour shift can be extended to 12 hours. So those type of mean, and that we have got a workshop, our guest house. There also we ensure that people are, all the supervisors and people are staying there in the guest house, which is within the plant, so that they don't go home and again bring the virus here or take back to the families also for some days. And those type of activity, and in our VPT plant, where we produce the best quality engine and export to Europe, to Volvo plants also. There, the first 1 month, I'm proud to say that we had a lesser manpower available here from the workman cadre. So there we went for where our supervisors themselves are working on the assembly line to ensure that the quality is not sacrificed. Those type of engagement need very little of, I will say, management, more of motivation, which is self-driven teams are there that helped us to sail through this crisis, where we have to meet our commitment to Europe also, and also US and also to Japan, where we have to supply the engines. But we could do that thing thanks to the teams and the environment, of course, support from the government of India.
Also, just to mention, yes, I'm just coming there, but just to remind, because we have a very strong audience also watching, and they have logged in to hear all of you. So in case there are any questions, we'll be happy to take their questions. So feel free to type them in the Q&A tab, and I will be very happy to take those questions. If you have specific questions for anyone, please do mention who it is for. Okay, coming to you, Mr. Doshi. A technology solution, because of the very interesting challenge that industry has faced, how does that work in terms of also, and there is another element to it, the policy element to it, because some of those labor codes, some of the labor laws have also changed in the last 12 months or so, a little more than 12 months, where states have changed some labor laws. How does that integrate into the larger picture of the operations for companies?
Absolutely, Ashutosh. I'd probably step back a moment, and I wanted to, I really like the way you mentioned just-in-time people management, and I think there were some great responses from Mr. Sachdeva, Mr. Ajay Lal, and Mr. Kapoor. I wanted to also give a bit of a technology angle to that, because there's some experience that I'd like to share, right? And I'll also come to your point, maybe take a minute there as well. So talent management has been obviously in the pandemic, especially that identifying and deploying the right talent at the right time at the right place has been a bigger challenge for manufacturing organizations, because the availability of people at any point in time has not always been as high as what would have been the case earlier, especially during the second wave. It was where a lot of people were sick or their families were sick. They were generally not available. one of the things that technology lets you do, though this obviously in a manufacturing environment, you look at your production plan and then you bring your people with certain skills together. That's the job, right, for a production supervisor. But in general, this tends to happen on an Excel sheet, or it tends to happen across multiple systems, and that's where it takes time and it does not give enough visibility. One of the things that we've helped some of our customers do is, let's look at the employee variables. The employee variables are their skills, their preferences, their availability, their health information. Are they living out of let's say a containment zone? Can I call them to my office, etc.? So these are all the employee variables that come into place when I have to deploy my employees onto a line. Then there are the business variables, which are the production plan, how much I need to produce, what SKUs I need to produce, what is the downtime, etc., etc. Bringing the business plan and the employee variables together. And as you can see, it's a complex linear programming problem, right? Where you have so many variables that need to come together so that you get an optimal outcome in terms of what are the right set of people with the right skill available in your ecosystem that you can bring in, has been one of the changes that we've seen that companies are beginning to adapt into, because a tool like this helps you shorten your planning time frame. When you're planning for 6 months and 3 months and 1 year, you don't need such amount of optimization. But when you bring that down, and when your workforce is in maybe a bit of a short supply, that kind of optimization becomes even more important. So that was one point I wanted to definitely talk about basis what everyone mentioned. Taking this a step further, the other area that we're seeing, I think, as you rightly mentioned, the new labor codes, which were supposed to be notified in April of 2021, this year, in fact, were deferred by the government, and they are now saying it will probably be notified by October. I've spoken to a lot of HR leaders, because when I look at the solutions that I work with our customers, manufacturing benefits from it, but then it's a people solution, so HR leaders also are owners of it. So I've spoken to a lot of HR leaders over the course of last few months, and one thing is very unanimous, that it has a significant impact on the way we will need to manage our employees. The cost of my operations will actually go up. For example, very simple things like, what is the definition of wage itself has changed. Whom do I pay overtime itself has changed, right? So there are significant, while it's a step in the right direction, I personally believe it's a step in the right direction to simplify a very complex set of acts in India. I think 27 acts are being brought down to 4. So while I think that's a great move for companies who need to comply with all of those, it will bring down the complexity of complying dramatically. But yes, if there is possibly a downside to it, the downside is the cost of doing business will go up, and which is where better optimization and better planning again play a role. How can you better optimize and better plan your workforce becomes a significant aspect. The third area that we are seeing increasingly organizations look at is, and Mr. Kapoor, I think, kind of hinted on it, is most manufacturing organizations have what you might call as white-collared employees, blue-collared employees, and then you also have a fair chunk of contract employees for the non-core jobs. Now, if you look at the labor codes are also impacting the contract employees significantly, right? What organizations should probably be doing, and some of our customers are already doing that, is you need to start getting into what you might call as unified manpower planning and visibility. Can I look at my whole manpower as a single set of manpower, of course, with their own boundaries around what they're supposed to do, and have a unified manpower view so that there is no unnecessary redundancy built into the organization as far as manpower is concerned. And when we work with organizations, we've seen at times visibility tends to be very localized. And because of localized visibility, it does not tend to give you the optimized view at the top. When you can put in technology to give you your global visibility across all categories of manpower, it helps you optimize your manpower so much more and do the best for your people as well. So I think these are some of the variables that we are seeing at play right now when we talk to some of our customers or when we talk to some of our prospects as well on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, since you referred to the unified approach for managing the workers, the laborers, and entire workforce itself, let me ask Mr. Kapoor. There's a question also from Colonel Mahesh Mathur. He says, how does one ensure that migrant labor is retained in future, or even managing that local labor if with low skill levels, they are sometimes, you tend to replace them? Would you like to take that question, Mr.
Yeah,
Kapoor?
it's a good question, and I wish I had a very clear-cut answer to this. I think what we need to do, we need to understand that in our country, workers are going to migrate in search of places where they want to work.
Mhm.
A migrant, and no labor is leaving, let's say, Bihar and coming down all the way to Rajasthan to work if he could get opportunities at his location. So there is a sort of, and I would not call it a massive shift taking place, but there is a shift taking place at this point of time with all the local, and one of the things which we realized pretty early on, the resilience in our business we realized came from the rural demands. While the urban demands and the urban centers, let's say like an NCR region or Mumbai or big cities like Pune, they suffered the most when the COVID thing came, and there the demands really came down. It was a rural area where the worker went back home, he had money with him, and he was free, and he could work himself in his own house. So the work started in those areas. So I think things that we can do and what we want to do more for migrant laborers when they come is firstly ensure that they get a good workplace. Sometimes, you would see that outside a big plant, there would be a colony of migrant laborers and they would be living in most abysmal kind of conditions. So if we could give them conditions, so we brought in, so we actually revisited the entire game as to how my migrant labor is staying. Where are they staying? What kind of toilets do they have? What is the way their food is being cooked? How can we make that more workable? And as I said, when migrant laborers left my plant site for going back to their villages, I ensured that they get a bus and they get 2 hot meals in their bus. And lots of them, when we wanted them back, came back. But we also realized that on a long-term perspective, you need to develop local labor. But there are parts of our country where the local population just doesn't want to work hard. And we also realize, and I would say it openly, though something which, we tend to be very careful about is that sometimes local labor tends to exploit the organization which is there in terms of various, they have various in kind of their network and other things you tend to avoid. At times, industries want to avoid local laborers because they feel that they can create nuisance in the plants. However, we believe other way around. In our plants, we have a lot of local labor and we are actually encouraging a mix. Ideally, a person should not need to migrate to work on such kind of jobs. But then that is going to happen, and industries need to make sure that they give an ecosystem and a kind of a place where they can come and stay and they feel comfortable and they have the confidence that they can get back home if required.
Also, Mr. Sachdeva, just switching topic a little bit, we've also seen different industries go about addressing this challenge of the way they've managed their manpower in different ways. Are there, as you interact with various people in the industry, do you see learnings that can be that are unique to one particular industry but possibly can be applied to another industry as well? So probably something like a best practice that you may have seen somewhere.
I feel that in terms of best practice, focus on productivity is number one thing. And today, when you look at the COVID and we look at the this type of pandemic, which we say last 100 years has not happened, productivity is one very, very important aspect, that how to manage the productivity within the plant. And there I see that manufacturing company like us, automobile company like us, definitely we can see that the utilization aspect, how the manpower is utilized, that should be focused on that. And if we see that COVID has exposed some of the issues that if I look at pre-COVID situation, I see that there have been a lot of fat has been there around in the organizations. But once you are dealing with the minimal conditions, and when you are dealing with the minimal production and minimal manpower, and then there's a constraint also getting the manpower, then you are seeing that how you are able to manage the various workflows, how you are able to manage the various SOPs without violating the final outcome, that thing. And looking at that and using some sort of technology, which we also try to use that thing during last 1.5 years, particularly on the real-time monitoring of the productivity aspect on the various lines, and then looking at that productivity and then optimizing the resources for that. Looking at that has helped us to actually reduce the manpower requirement in some of the areas which are not earlier exposed. We are able to expose that thing, and then we are able to take care of the productivity aspect in a better manner. So that's the one thing which I say that we need to do. And second aspect is in terms of manpower management. I say that it's, I think, known to everybody that the more trust we have got with the teams, definitely we get better support, and all the teams work as a one unit, definitely enhances the productivity and product deliveries also. So that's what I have to share.
Okay, since we are on that topic of what are some of those learning and some of the best practices, there's a question also coming from Satish Talapalli, and this question is for Mr. Doshi. How did technology adoption improve during the pandemic period, or the companies found being comfortable in using existing semi-automated stroke less automated systems that could challenge the manpower efficiencies? Would you like to take that, Mr. Doshi?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I think I'd like to hear the experience of the other panelists also, but I'll quickly share my thoughts. I think without a doubt, Satish, that technology adoption has increased. There is absolutely no doubt about it. I think if you were to look at some numbers, I think just look at Google's numbers this quarter versus last quarter. Their revenues, I think, almost doubled. Okay, for a large company like that, their company is revenue doubled. But let's hold that thought aside for a moment. The fact was digitization was the only savior. And it's not just in the space that we operate in. We operate in the space where we help organizations better optimize their manpower and manage their workforce better. But let's take an example of what Mr. Ajay Lal mentioned some time back. He talked about the paint thing where he said where they wanted visibility, and instead of a person going and sitting there, they put some technology solution so that they could watch it from home. That also was technology adoption. One example of technology adoption, right? So Satish, to your point, technology adoption increased in spades across companies, and it was not that it was a good to have or it was a luxury, it was mandatory in almost all the cases, number one. It is also possible, I don't have real data to substantiate it, but I'm pretty sure my co-panelists will also agree. I'm pretty certain that it is also possible that companies with semi-automated systems who did not digitize as fast as the other companies did, they probably took a larger hit in productivity. They are probably less competitive today. And the companies who actually went ahead and digitized during these times, when their business was not doing well, spent the money on digitization, they've come out in almost all probability, almost certainly much stronger. And so I think there's some saying, and I can't recollect that completely, but a situation like this is actually a great opportunity to look at it as an opportunity, not as an adversity, right? So companies who actually look at this as an opportunity will come out trumps. And so we've seen our solutions usage increased by our customers, but then it's across the board. That's my view. But yes, any other thoughts?
I would love to hear that. Add here that what you said is right, Sumit, that it was a crisis, but we could convert it to opportunity. Like I distinctly remember that Industry 4.0, we could, before pre-COVID, we could execute only 40-50% of the projects in the Industry 4.0. But once the COVID came and there was need for being the contactless operation, always, whether it's a machine maintenance or it's a paint shop or it's a fuel consumption, where say LNG consumption has to be monitored physically, but since less manpower is there and also you want to make the contact free, you could make sure that almost 80 to 90% of the project was converted into the contact free using the digitalization and using your mobile and other thing where you can get the signals. And where based on that, you can see that any corrective action need to be taken, that also is being taken as the contact free and remotely it is taken there. So digitalization, Industry 4.0, those techniques, I will see that was one thing which we could see that our speed of implementation became much faster in the COVID era, which is helping us today also. So this is one point I want to do.
Right. Thanks.
Okay. So some more questions also coming in. Mr. Lal, if you'd like to take this, there's a person whose name chosen to remain anonymous and has a question. What do you think about the future work policy? How can we maintain sustainable production? I'm presuming the person wants to understand in the context of what has been happening. How do you have, what is the future, and how do you have a sustainable production plan, I would guess?
So if I understand the question right, Ashu, if the person is wanting to know about sustainability, I think that issue has really come up very, very clearly and strongly during the COVID period. People really realized on what humanity has done or has not done for sustainability. So I think
this is more about sustainable production. That's the word says, how to maintain sustainable production.
Okay, so it is not about sustainability.
No.
But anyway, I'll complete my thought on sustainability. I think it's a key issue.
Sure.
I think most important, and all of us are aware of what's happening in the country and outside our country, and how it is important to maintain the global, increase of temperature within 1.5 degrees. So I think most companies have taken targets to do net zero kind of efforts so that we become more sustainable. But coming back to the question in the interest of time, so sustainable production. So one is, of course, we have something called a SNOP platform, sales and operations planning. So during these uncertain times, the demand was uncertain, and like all our esteemed co-panelists also mentioned, the supply side was also uncertain. The problems that we are facing, our vendors were facing, and many of the vendors, tier 2s and tier 3s, were located all across. Maybe the tier 4 vendor was somewhere in China, but that was impacting my tier 1 vendor in India, and therefore it was impacting me. So I think for sustainable production, it was very important that all of us aligned the demand side, because it was so uncertain. So we actually, kind of collapsed our monthly cycle to a fortnightly cycle. So the demand started coming on a fortnightly basis. And then we had, collaboration platform with the vendors, and transparently those used to get shared with our vendors. So they got a visibility of our plan on a short-term basis, on a fortnightly basis, and also on a long-term basis, so that they could get bigger time or a longer period for them to plan their operations, their raw material planning, their people planning. So I think the first point was, how do we take care of this uncertainty by having closer interaction with all stakeholders, demand side, supply side, and giving each one, as much time as possible, and collaborating and cooperating with each other. In many cases, for example, we went into direct engagement with, tier 2 and tier 3 kind of suppliers. All of us are aware of the semiconductor crisis now. So now, for our tier 1 vendors, we are actually engaging with the direct wafer suppliers or IC suppliers, and we are trying to kind of, smoothen the process. Although it's a big challenge today, but I think that's what we can do together to make sure that our supply line keeps running, our planning is visible, transparent, and use all the digitization techniques that just got talked about, so that everything is available online, transparent, right? And just to build on one more thought, if time permits.
Sure.
So you mentioned about the planning. So what our folks in Pantnagar did, we have a plant in Pantnagar who does small commercial vehicles. So the moment somebody would board a bus, he will swipe his attendance card. So people in the plant would come to know that which person is actually coming. And it is mapped. For example, if you're working on an assembly line, you know that this person can work on this station. And then usually we train people to work on +-1 or +-2 stations. So he has a clear visibility of which person is coming and what skills he has. And therefore, even before the bus actually comes, all the buses come to the plant gate, he has actually decided how to allocate this manpower. And on the LED screen of every shop, each while coming, you would know that where does he have to go. So not only you save time, but also people generally gather, and supervisor would allocate your workstation and all that. All that is taken care of. So you save time, you save people crowding, and that's how it helps. And it's a simple technology that got used, and it was developed by our own teams.
Okay.
I like to add a couple
Please,
of aspects
please.
to this. So I think Ajay has very rightly brought out a lot of supply chain challenges that are there. But I think in terms of sustainable operation, the first point to really understand is that you will only make sustainable production if there is demand. So because of this COVID scenario, and in products like ours, where we don't want our cement to be kept for beyond, let's say, a certain time limit, it gets spoiled, and you can't just keep producing. You have limited storage facilities. You would need to do quite a bit of demand mapping and make sure to see what is happening. And in fact, pretty early on in the cycle, we realized and we started identifying what are the new sites which are coming up in the markets we operate. Because if a new site is coming up, it is going to need cement where the site is there. So on this, what are the stakeholders thinking on this? The stakeholders, my employees are worried. People who are getting daily wages are worried whether they will get paid or not. So our managing director came upfront on social media and announced that we are going to make payments to all daily workers and everybody who are working, even when the plant is closed. So we put their fears at rest. That okay, that is, I think, the first stakeholder. We tend to forget our own employee. Then what is happening to other stakeholders, the small MSME players and other players who have a limited payment cycle? We try to be we try to pay them sometimes in advance, but at least much before the payment timelines were there. And also once so let's say the demand is there, we understood that we are in a sector where the demand will come back. It's only and demand did come back after 2 months of shutdown. It came back in a manner that we could not cope up to it.
Yeah.
Because there is a sudden boom in demand, as in auto also they were mentioning that in 3 months suddenly it boomed up. So that demand will be there, because a person who's half made his house is not going to now say कि मैं ऊपर छत नहीं डालूंगा because I have pandemic has come. He's going to do that. The country's economy is going to move in the right direction. So with that confidence, we actually gave confidence to all our stakeholders. But we also realized that sometimes in some of the things, let's say our bag manufacturing and the PP resin was to be imported, and if the import is not happening, how do we make our bags? So we try to visualize our complete demand cycle and to the best of our ability, and both upstream and downstream try to help our various business partners who are there as to how we could support them and move forward. I hope that helps the question in terms of how sustainable operations can be maintained.
Okay, that's another. So we earlier spoke about learning from the best practices, and Mr. Sachdeva answered that question. Mr. Doshi, would you like to add something to that? Because your experience would be across sectors, across the best practices across sectors. Would you like to add something to what Mr. Sachdeva referred to?
Yeah, sure. And I think long back, someone I consider one of my mentors actually told me this, that when you're benchmarking, and you're benchmarking within your industry, which means there is someone sort of mentally better than you, right? But when you're benchmarking someone outside your industry, you probably have run through all benchmarking within your industry, and you're looking for other ways to improve, right? In fact, in World War II, the logistics problem in World War II was solved by benchmarking by benchmarking with the circus industry in US. Okay. So this was a narrative given to me by someone, and I found that fascinating. They looked at how an entire circus could move from one city to another in a matter of a couple of days. So why can't you do that on the war field, right? So that's so bringing that perspective for a moment. And there are industries across the board that we worked with, and I thought in the pandemic I wanted to take an example, in fact, of one of the largest hospital chains in India, who manage their employees using some of our solutions, right? They've got roughly 35 to 40,000 employees, and imagine most of us went for a lockdown at least for those 2 months. This was a hospital that had no lockdown whatsoever, right? It was a hospital. From day one, 24/7, they had to be operating, and their ability to identify the right set of resources, right doctors, right nurses, right skilled nurses, right paramedical boys, was critical for them to be able to handle the patient load that was coming in. The patient load is from a manufacturing standpoint, that's a production load, right? But that's really what you need to handle. So this was an organization that actually handled 40,000 employees across the country, across a large number of hospitals, and tried to use the technology available to constantly identify. And this was happening on a day-to-day basis because things were changing every day. Doctors were constantly exposed to patients. Someone would fall sick, some nurse would fall sick. How do you find a replacement? Who is the potential replacement available? What skill sets are available? What are not available? That was a constant thing that they had on a daily basis, shift by shift basis. Fatigue was another very big area. In fact, we all know in hospital environments, doctors and nurses and paramedical staff is sleeping in hospitals for weeks and months, right? But then how do you identify the amount of time that they worked and give them adequate breaks so that fatigue is not just detrimental to that particular employee, but it is also detrimental to the patient? You could actually go ahead and make an error with the patient, right? So that was another area that they actually looked at through the solutions technology framework that we had provided. Contact tracing allowed them to identify people who need to be quarantined, so on and so forth. So I think that hospital is a great example of what they did, how they did planning on a scale of one day. Every day they were changing their plan and how they were moving on a day-to-day basis and deploying people. That's one example. Another from another industry, and this is a diversified conglomerate across a whole lot of industries, manufacturing and logistics and so on and so forth. And I think I mentioned earlier in my introduction as well, but when it came to managing their people, they were especially focused because they have a very, very large, and some industries have a very, very large percentage of contract workforce. As high as 70 to 80% of their total workforce becomes contract workforce, right? Some industries tend to have it that way. So for them, their availability was paramount. Their availability was one of the biggest reasons how they could manage their business optimally on a day-to-day basis. And when it came to when it came around the second wave, when it came to vaccination, the way they were able to put out their entire plan to vaccinate 60,000 plus contract employees and their families was by looking at the database that they had built centrally. Generally, what happens in a lot of organizations is contract workforce especially is kept more locally. You do not bring that at a central level because it's generally never required is the thought process. But this pandemic has shown that you need that information also so that you can take care of your employees. They're also your employees, maybe not direct employees, but they're indirect employees and they're people end of day. So that because they had the data available, they were able to run the programs and initiatives and put out the entire plan, and they were able to pretty much, last I know, they were almost on the verge of completing the vaccination for their entire workforce as well. That's another example. And a third example that I'd like to take is an FMCG company, again, where I alluded to this sometime back, where they actually looked at the whole workforce as a unified manpower, unified workforce. Again, a lot of companies I've seen tend to keep contract, full-time, blue-collar, white-collar, all of them in kind of certain silos. But when it comes to optimizing your workforce, if you can bring them together, it just gives you better flexibility in terms of managing your people better, right? And there is this particular company who, with about 17,000 people in their operations across 20 odd plants, where they have complete visibility across all their workforce, both from a safety, fatigue, compliance, production visibility. From all aspects, they have that visibility available at one place, which is something that I think a lot of companies can benefit from. These are some thoughts, I think, where we've seen companies benefiting from what we've done.
Okay, so that also suggests that manufacturing companies could consider, they have lived through the two phases of the virus spreading and causing a little bit of havoc, more than just a little bit of havoc actually. So is there some best practices that now we need to learn from the experience of the last 18 months or so? Mr. Lal, would you like to begin on some things? How do we create the right environment so that some of these best practices can last and actually become part of the operations of manufacturing companies?
Right. So I think some of these learnings are going to continue even beyond the COVID period. For example, all the quick progress that was made on digital, that's going to only go up and that's going to only sustain. So I think that is something that's going to remain and sustain beyond COVID period. What's also going to remain and sustain is, there are many things which have happened differently. Now people have got, kind of used to it, and they have found more efficient ways of doing things. I think that is another thing which is going to stay. So all the efficiencies which came, like Mr. Sachdeva rightly mentioned, that how this crisis was converted into opportunity. So all those things are going to sustain beyond. But I think there are two more things which will largely remain. One is building resilience in supply chain. People have seen how supply chain can become very brittle, how dependence, and how do we bring actually some kind of a alternate here, so that we are not dependent on only one geography, or we are not dependent on only one or two major people, because that could be quite chaotic. So building resilience in supply chain is something which teams are going to work on and continue working on.
Mhm.
And another thing is sustainability. I would say that during this period, people have come to know that how important what important role all of us can play, especially the large corporates and all of us as citizens, in fact. And therefore, that is going to become a big agenda. So, in my view, digital supply chain resilience, sustainable initiative, these things are something that are going to stay and are really going to be helpful going forward.
Okay. Somebody just mentioned it to me and said that some of the employees, he said, in his company would love to work from home and extend this. That is another change that people may want to see. I'm not sure if that is possible to continue for very long. But Mr. Kapoor, would you like to comment on that, on some of the things that will stay and make companies more efficient and probably tilt them to better practices in workforce and the management of the entire workforce?
No, I think absolutely right. A lot of employees, especially when you come to corporate office kind of roles, or the roles where you. So the question, when one of my colleagues asked me that he wanted to go to office for something, and it was during when the pandemic was on its rise, I asked him, "Do you really need to be there? What is it that really takes you to the office?" So when I would like to address this question in two parts. For people who are in corporate offices working, in sales and other things, uh, there the question is that some of our employees want to go to the office because they are staying, if they're in a metro city, they are staying in a single bedroom house with two kids and their wife and husband both are working. They don't have an workplace where they can work properly. So they want to go there. And we have employees who have sought this, that we want to go to office because we can work efficiently there. But if the job does not need it, and what we have seen in these times is that the efficiency of people does not go down if they work from home. And we have seen the goodness of the, I think, human work culture in this during this crisis, when there were for months people were working from home, and we were delivering record after record output. And we also realized during this time, and in our kind of a network or a business where we depend on number of dealers and retailers and small retailers spread across the country, and I'm talking of figures in tune of 2,000 to 3,000 kind of outlets where cement is being sold. We started doing digital interaction with them, video interaction with our salespeople, and understanding what challenges they have. But then ultimately a human interaction is needed, and where it is needed, people will go. Coming to the factories and plants, I think the solution is not so simple, and you can't work from home. You need to be there physically to make sure some things are done. But can you get technology there? Yes, you can. Like let's say, for example, right in the beginning, we realized that a truck driver who comes inside a plant carries a piece of paper which keeps getting stamped at every stage that he goes inside a plant, and we identified 4 to 5 such places where he goes, and the payment is done, and then he takes a slip, and then something happens, and then immediately our RFID systems were already there. We implemented them in such a way that there was a paperless entry and exit of any person into our plant. So that means some people get free. Now, do they lose their jobs? That's a question. So we also have to look at the ethical part when we start doing too much of automation. How many people are going to lose their job because people are dependent on the company? So can you fit them into your expansion model into some other roles that come in? And with all the, AI and Industry 4.0 and other things coming in, like so much of our condition monitoring is now moving on to automation. The complete COVID drive has actually precipitated or rather increased the speed at which we were doing our things. So it's going to be a mix, and certainly we have seen that work from home works. Otherwise, today for this conference that you are holding, or this discussion that we are having, I would have traveled. If you are in Mumbai, so I would have traveled first in the morning by the flight to Mumbai, and then taken a cab somewhere and reached some hotel where you would have organized, and then finish this and then go back to the airport again. So much of time is getting saved. So I think it's going to be a mix, but nothing can replace human interaction. The digital interaction, sometimes like meetings, also tends to get too focused. There is no lateral thinking happening. So we're going to have a mix of it. But I, for one, am totally, for working from home where we can.
Okay, just taking the point further to what Mr. Kapoor said, Mr. Sachdeva, to you, there was a question from the audience, and this is Siladitya, very relevant question to what Mr. Kapoor mentioned. The question says, will not the pandemic lead to more automation and reduce the requirement for human resources? How do you see it? You're on mute, Mr. Sachdeva.
Yes, it's a very difficult question to answer, and that too. And as I was saying that if we see that overall India, if we see today, look at the stock market, look at price earning multiple of Nifty today in COVID, this is better than pre-COVID era.
Yeah.
So this shows that we have been more efficient in the pandemic, despite having so many challenges, despite having people operating from home, despite having a lot of supply chain challenges. Still, we are more efficient. That means, yes, there's some fat is there. This is what I was saying earlier. And as we more and more analyze, we feel that we can live without some of the peoples now, and we can still perform the way we are doing earlier. Again, coming back to the manpower productivity and relevance, and also skill set. How do we look at the different competency? Those people need to be imparted the different competency in the new era. So training our people, instead of telling them to go home, we tell them how we retrain those people with respect to the latest competency, and still ensure that they are relevant within the organizations. I think that's what is the need of hour, and there I see that automation is a need of hour. As I was saying, the Industry 4.0, in our case, I can say that speed of implementation has gone up tremendously and helped us. And with that, what Mr. Rajneesh was also saying, that need for manpower, probably we see that coming down. And there we have a challenge. Our HR has got a challenge. Our line supervisor have a challenge, that how do we retain, and still enhance our efficiency further. That's what we need to do that.
Okay, very interesting, that last line, that we need to retrain and identify the right set of people, I'd imagine, for training and maybe enhance efficiency that way. Given the reality, Mr. Doshi, given the way people are now spread out, people are working from all kinds of locations in industries where it is possible, not just in manufacturing. And I'm trying to suggest a larger picture. Is this an opportunity for technology to make deeper inroads, to make our businesses more efficient? And is this the opportunity also for companies? And if we can just expand it a little bit beyond the manufacturing part, I'm taking slightly the larger question there.
Sure. I think that's a great question, and that's an area that the world is definitely moving to. In fact, there was a survey that we conducted along with SHRM some time back, and it came out very clearly that a majority, I don't remember the percentage offhand, but a majority of the people actually would prefer to work from home, or would prefer flexibility in working. And I think it's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we are noticing in the way the world is moving is we are getting to a point where, and now I'm talking slightly broad-based beyond manufacturing as well, but it's applicable to manufacturing also. What we are noticing is the global workforce will now sort of eventually get classified into three broad categories. It's an overgeneralization, but it's going there. One, you will have fixed work from home employees. Those guys can sit at home and work forever. Second is you will have fixed work from office or work from plant employees, right? The manufacturing guys have to come to plant. The retail guys will have to go to a store. You cannot take that away. And then there is a hybrid workforce that is formed, where at times you will have to go to office to communicate. If there is some kind of a creative thing that you need to do, you're in some role where you need to hobnob, you need to kind of interact with your colleagues. So people are getting classified, and this will take some time to arrive at a finality. It will probably never have a finality, but really organizations are beginning to go towards these three categories of employees. Even manufacturing organizations, they are probably moving more to hybrid and in the office, probably not 100% at home. Maybe they will. What that does, the reason why I wanted to highlight this is what that does is it increases the complexity of managing your workforce, right? You will start figuring out different categories of workforces and which category of workforce can work from where. That's the direction it will start going in. And again, it's just a coincidence that I'm taking a Google example again, but just yesterday or day before, I read somewhere that I think it was Google or some other company which said that we will pay differently for people working from home versus working from office. Right? If it was not Google, we can ignore the company name, but I definitely read a company news out there which said that's happening. What that means is the policy framework for my workforce will start evolving. Companies will start looking at, in the US, if you're working in California, it's a very costly state. And if you're working in Texas, it's a very cheap state. Now there are people who've relocated to Texas working for Californian companies, correct? So companies will look through that, right? And some of these policy changes will start coming in. So the employees will get more flexibility. Organizations will give those flexibility, but in order, the more flexibility requires more technology. It's as simple as that. If you have a policy which is one size fits all, you need zero technology. Let's look at it this way, right? Everybody needs to come at 9, needs to go at 5. That's it, nothing else. Then you really need no flexibility, no technology to manage a large workforce. But the moment you start breaking them down into pieces, into a lot of various buckets of different categories, policies, etc., frameworks, and so on and so forth, you need better digital adoption so as to be able to manage that better. So to your question, Ashutosh, definitely the usage of technology adoption for managing the workforce in any organization will increase, because some of these complexities are going to increase, and we are already seeing that across across multiple industries.
Okay, for all the three gentlemen who have been or who are in their own run very large operations and are with brands that are spread across locations, how is that change manifesting? Can you see some semblance of that change happening in your companies? Let's say, Mr. Lal, if you can start, can you see those three buckets or more or less happening in your company, and even people starting to work beyond, Pune or a Jamshedpur or a Pantnagar to carry out their work?
Absolutely, I think that is happening, and I think Sumit has put it very rightly. I think these three clusters are kind of forming, and we have actually adopted all these three, even now at all our locations. So absolutely, yes, I think that's happening.
Okay, Mr. Kapoor, your answer to that observation from Mr. Doshi?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think it's still evolving. I can just give you an example. So we were in the process of making a new office for one of our complexes, and we brought in a concept of hot seats now. So I said, okay, I need 10 seats in this office, and balance people need not come. So we'll work out who needs to come on what days, because we realized that all groups need not be present at the same time in the office. So it's going to happen. And yes, I agree. There are going to be people who will have to come to their workplace because their role is such. There could be people who may not need to come to the workplace, and there would be some who would keep coming from time to time for interactions and other things. And I think the digital medium is going to be very, very important. We have all seen, just imagine, if COVID had happened maybe 20 years back, how we would have worked. I just keep wondering at times, I think the systems would have crashed, or we would have all had to go to the workplace to work and undertake so much of risk. I still recall, that was March 10th or 12th when we first started, last year. Holi was, I think, on 10th, 11th or something. And in our company, we had preempted this, that China, it's happening, and we had actually announced a work from home a week before or 10 days before the so many others started. So we had a first conference, monthly review conference on a Zoom call, and it was such a unique thing to do. Today, I think my father, who's 87, also can operate it. So people have, the technology leap has taken place, and we realize that we can do this work. So it's going, but it's a process of moving forward, learning, and it will evolve, because finally, I think nothing can replace the human interaction.
Okay, absolutely.
In a boardroom today, you can hold the board meetings here, but the talk which takes place in whispers in the boardroom is not happening now. And that is needed. We are human beings and we are not machines. So it's going to be a mix, but digital off office working or remote working is certainly now a very, very important facet. Today, I can get an expert from Germany and discuss with him with all digital, connections, and he can give me an advice on my equipment if I'm facing a problem. So that's where the benefit comes in.
Okay. Mr. Sachdeva, your point about the three buckets that Mr. Doshi mentioned, and any related observations you'd like to make?
Well, I fully agree that I think a hardcore company like us, and I think we are different from Sumit's company, which is more on the softer side. It's a hardcore manufacturing. We always believed what Rajneesh is saying, that human interaction is the best. All through our life, we have believed only that. But once we have started working last 18 months on the digital platform and hybrid working, we see there's a second best is definitely the hybrid working, the second best. May not be the first best. And we have seen that it offers enormous flexibility. We are 40 kilometers away. Our plant is 40 kilometers away. Anybody has to go to school for their children or anything, he can attend that school and also attend all the meetings also while being at home. So those type of flexibility, which we see that in any case, I think offering a very good flexibility. Second, digitalization. And third, I see that our focus on productivity, which is a very difficult chapter to open, but definitely we have started looking those things under the microscope and seeing that how do we work further to enhance the overall efficiency. So I fully agree with Sumit, what he has said. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Doshi, the last word to you. The measurable part of some of the change that is happening. How easy has the strong push of digitization made for things to be more measurable, so that companies can weigh whether it is how good it is for them?
Right. So I think I'll probably look at a couple of points. I think the things that are changing for companies, and I'll keep it limited to the context of the workforce, because that's what we focus on. So I'll keep it limited to the context of the workforce. And I think for companies, companies need to move, I think, in a direction when it comes to the workforce where they have more agile planning. I talked about the planning windows shortening as we speak when it comes to workforce. So they need to have more agile planning with their workforce, more centralized visibility for larger organizations with multiple locations, etc. I think they need to move in that direction where their visibility is much better, more centralized, and joining the various dots and variables around employee preferences as well as business variables, so as to be able to deliver the best experience to the employee, but yet extract the best for the company. So employee experience and empowering them remains the key. I think Mr. Sachdeva and other panelists, all of them right in the beginning mentioned that gaining employee trust and is extremely critical. And that applies to every industry. We noticed it in our industry as well during the pandemic. The more we could communicate and the more we could do for them, the more we could gain their trust, they delivered better. So delivering a great employee experience is important. But one of the things we've noticed in the manufacturing sector is at times communicating with the last mile employee has not always been very easy, because lack of enough digitization to a blue collar employee or that kind of an employee. How can you and given that we deal with these technologies, we've seen that the moment you try and digitize some of the technologies to your end employee, last mile employee, and giving them information directly, you improve their experience, you improve their engagement, and you see that they start responding better to you. So I think these are some of the aspects. There is a human side to it, and there is a very mathematical side to it also. You need optimization, you need right planning, and so on and so forth. But how can you weave them together is where technology comes into play to help organizations.
Okay, so possibly working is going to change for a lot of people. So, and probably people may also have options for tomorrow. Well, that's all the time we have. Before we leave, Mr. Doshi, one would request you for a vote of thanks. If you can take a minute or two for that, please.
Absolutely, and it will be my pleasure. I would like to thank Mr. Kapoor, Mr. Lal, and Mr. Sachdev for taking their time out. I know it's an extremely busy time, and with the roles that you play, taking hour and a half, 2 hours out is not easy at all. So thank you so much for taking the time out, and some of the insights that you provided were amazing. We wanted to organize this along with ET to learn from leaders like you, and I think I go back with a lot of learning. So thank you so much for taking the time out. Ashutosh, pleasure interacting with you, and thank you for being such an amazing host.
Thank you so much for your kind words. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Lal. Thank you, Mr. Kapoor, Mr. Sachdeva, and Mr. Doshi. Thank you, everyone, for being with us.
Very nice.
Thank you.
We look forward to being with you again and again, and carrying on this discussion across topics, across some of the key issues. And please do join us as and when we come back to you again. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.